Coming up today, Liege-Bastogne-Liege rounds out the spring classic season and produces two very worthy winners, even if one of them has a slightly squeaky bum moment with 6 kilometres to go. We also have Fleche Wallonne, a confirmation of talent at the Tour of the Alps, and a couple of notable retirements. And for something completely different, the Rasputitsa Gravel Race from Vermont. 3, 2, 1, that was the countdown for Jakob Fuglsang over the Ardennes week, with third at Amstel, second at Fleche, and finally the win at Liege-Bastogne-Liege. That was bettered though by Annemiek van Vleuten of Mitchelton Scott, who was second, and first in those same races. Sadly, we didn't get to see that win live, more on that a bit later. For Fuglsang, it was his first monument victory and a just reward for what has been a stellar season so far, and by far his best form in one-day races. He's finished 4 one-day races this season and never finished off the podium, but the thorn in his side has been Julian Alaphilippe. Yesterday though, it looked to be one race too far for Alaphilippe, who wasn't quite the rider that we've come to expect for the rest of the season. His team rode perfectly, but on the final climb when Fuglsang went, he just didn't have the power to follow. According to Mikkel Konda on Twitter, Alaphilippe had seen him coming. Speaking to Danish reporter Sanne Jakobsen, Fuglsang said, "At one point before Redoute, Alaphilippe was next to me and he knew that he didn't have it today. He told me, 'I hope you win today.'" What a gracious thing to say, especially given their small spat at the Amstel Gold Race. It did make me wonder though, why De Koning Quickstep were riding full gas for Alaphilippe all the way in to La Redoute, but at the same time it was almost a tactical coup. Everyone was waiting for Alaphilippe to attack. It didn't happen on Redoute, it didn't happen on the Côte de Forges, and it didn't happen on the last climb of the day, the Roche aux Faucons. We all know now why. But had Fuglsang not taken the initiative there, Alaphilippe may have been able to sit in and get a result even when he wasn't at 100%. Maybe Fuglsang thought he was bluffing. Regardless, Fuglsang winning the final spring monument can only mean one thing. Close your ears, it's the Astana wrap.
We are the only team who were blue before. All the other blue teams is better to ignore. Our leaders of the gang, this is Jakob Fuglsang.
Let's hope that no other team decides that wrapping is the recipe for success. Bora Hansgrohe took the other 2 spots on the podium. Davide Formolo was unable to stay with Fuglsang when he went clear, but he managed to stay away from the chasers to take his best result in a monument, while Max Schachmann won the sprint for third. For me, the other 2 highlights were this, where Jon Izagirre decided he'd had enough of racing for the day and appeared to find a local house for an early shower. And this, EF Education first, Michael Woods with one leg warmer and not the other. It's a good look. Now, whilst the men's race was expected to ignite early, given the route change and the flatter finish, it didn't. But the women's race did. That was where Annemiek van Vleuten made her move, never to be seen again. Or even at the time, if you weren't there. ASO quite rightly came in for a large amount of criticism when they announced that they wouldn't be showing the women's Fleche Wallonne or Liege-Bastogne-Liege live. The fact that they made the effort to create the women's Liège just 3 years ago makes it even stranger that they would then choose not even to make the effort to show it. Especially when you look at the viewing figures quoted here on Twitter by Dan Van Reeth, which shows that the women's Amstel Gold Race was watched by 1.2 million people in the Netherlands, France, Denmark and Flanders alone. Regardless, Van Vleuten's ride was a dominant one. She'd already carved out a 30-second lead by the top of La Redoute, and that continued to increase throughout her solo escape. By the end, it was 1 minute and 39 seconds over Floortje Mackaij, who came through for second, while a jubilant Demi Vollering of Park-Hotel Valkenburg won the sprint for third to make it an all-Dutch podium. But there can be only one GCN rider of the week, Annemiek van Vleuten, second in Amstel, second in Fleche, and the winner yesterday. This year, her only competitive outings have been 7 one-day races, and she's not finished outside the top 7. And at 36, she's showing the rest how it's done. With that victory, she now has quite a commanding lead over Marianne Vos in the UCI Women's World Tour rankings. We'd also give some special mentions to Lizzie Deignan, who finished 7th yesterday in what is just her 3rd race back after giving birth, and Anneke Langvad, a mountain biker who at 35 has competed in her first 4 World Tour races this year, finishing 2nd, 3rd and 14th. Not too shabby. That 3rd place, incidentally, on Wednesday's Fleche Wallonne, where she finished behind her teammate Anna van der Breggen, who took her 5th win in a row up the wall, that is, the Mur de Huy. In the men's Fleche Wallonne, we saw some pretty nasty crashes. Jonit Zagire along with Team Sky's Eddie Dunbar here. And then a few kilometres later, Roman Kreuziger and Domenico Pozzovivo came off on a central reservation. Pozzovivo's crash looked particularly nasty. He didn't break any bones, but the facial trauma, unfortunately, was enough to prevent him from riding Liège. Despite some dangerous looking long range attacks, we'd end up with the inevitable group fight up the Mur de Huy, and in many ways the inevitable winner. Fuglsang made him work hard for it, but Alaphilippe took his 2nd win on the trot. One of the revelations of the day, though, was 22-year-old Björg Lambrecht, who finished 4th. Such was the effort he put in that the Lotto Soudal rider almost collapsed at the top, as this footage from Merin Castelline at VTM News shows. That man went very deep indeed. The big stage race last week was the Tour of the Alps, a 5-day race in Austria and Italy, formerly known as the Giro del Trentino. There are a number of riders who head there to prepare for the Giro d'Italia, amongst them this year Vincenzo Nibali, fresh from a spell at altitude. The Italian was on fine form, putting in a heap of attacks on the climbs, but he came up against the talented couple of riders from Team Sky. Teo Gegenhardt took his first pro win on the opening day from a group sprint of around 20, whilst the following day, 21-year-old Pavel Sivakov did exactly the same, riding away from Jan here on the final climb to Siena and taking the leader's jersey from his teammate in the process. And it would be a lead that he would never relinquish, despite the best efforts of Nibali and Rafał Majka. The Russian was also helped by the most super of super domestiques that you're ever likely to see, none other than Chris Froome. Along with Gegenhardt, who also won stage 4, they dealt with everything that was thrown at them, Sivakov becoming the 2nd youngest overall winner of the race. Also impressing was Fausto Masnada, who took his first 2 wins in Europe on stages 3 and 5, both of them solo. Watch out for him at the Giro. Last week also saw a couple of high-profile retirements. First up, Jeremy Powers. Jay Pow has been a legend within US cyclocross, not only amassing over 90 UCI wins, but also actively encouraging and bringing others into the sport. Also, the outpouring of love on social media upon his announcement from the general public and fellow professional riders was really quite incredible. This tweet from Teo Gegenhardt, I think, sums up the response perfectly. And as you'll see at the end of that tweet, he'll be joining us as a US-based presenter at the start of June, which we're all over the moon about. So big welcomes to Jeremy. Also announcing his impending retirement is Davide Rebellin. He's best known for 3 things: winning Amstel Fleche and Liège in 2004, serving a ban for doping after testing positive at the Beijing Olympic Games, and finally for continuing to compete at a high level well into his 40s. To put that into context, according to Amati Piorali on Twitter, 209 of the current 477 World Tour riders were not even born when Rebellin turned pro. His last race will be the Italian Championships, not long before his 48th birthday. Let's hope it hasn't been a hasty decision. And now for something completely different. The Rasputitsa Gravel Race in Vermont is, according to the organisers, a psychotic 40-mile drop to your knees and cry sufferfest. This year, 17-year-old Magdalene Varese took out the women's race from 2 big names from the world of cyclocross and gravel in Magali Rochette, who was 2nd, and Alison Tetrick, who was 3rd. Lars Bohm was also on the start line. He came home in 6th. Raphael Auclair took the win with another 17-year-old Magnus Sheffield 2nd, and Bruno Langlois rounding out the podium. If you've got an interesting or unusual event that you think the world should see here on the GCN Racing News Show, why not leave it in the comments section below? The quirkier, the better. Next week, we'll be back with the Tour de Romandy, the Eschborn Frankfurt and the Tour de Yorkshire, which features the likes of Froome, Van Avermaet, Cavendish and Kittel while a great women's field includes the likes of Van Vleuten, Deignan, Van der Breggen and Marianne Vos. Head over to GCN's Facebook page for live coverage in North America of Frankfurt and Yorkshire, and also for highlights of Romandy. That's all for this week. I'll leave you with this spectacular video of Cy riding the North Coast 500 with round the world legend Mark Bowman. It's well worth a watch.